Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Dragon Eclipse from Awakened Realms. Dragon Eclipse is a 1 to 2 player game that has you fighting, defeating, and capturing dragons and other creatures as you go through a series of adventures. This over here is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change. In fact, this particular prototype is missing a lot of things. There's no way for me to explore the full game here. There's a full roguelite mode I can't explore. Currently it's only adjusted right now for 1 player, so there's a lot of things behind this right now, but we'll get into that as we go through this, and of course I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Now before we start, regular disclaimer that I do work for GameFound. GameFound and Awakened Realms, the company behind Dragon Eclipse, there is shared ownership behind those companies, so take that potential bias into account. If this video is not right for you, that's perfectly okay. There are a bunch of videos out there on Dragon's Eclipse. I highly recommend the One Stop Co-op Shop. He has a gameplay and impressions and thoughts on the game, so you can check that out, as well as a bunch of other content creators. But with that, if you are sticking around for the show over here, this is Dragon Eclipse. This over here is a game of, like I said already, capturing, fighting, defeating, taming other dragons and creatures in this game. You're going to be starting off, the game's going to give you a bit of a tutorial. You're going to be starting off with your very first combat, not this one over here. I reround to a mid-level combat because I want to show you some aspects of capturing, but this over here, for me, this is my second combat. I assume for you it will be. This game has choose your own adventure, so I can't tell you for sure your own pathway you'll be going through, and I didn't try to track the different pathways you can go through. But you'll start off with a basic combat. You'll choose a starting creature, either a fireling or an emberling or an iceling, and you're going to go ahead and engage in your very first combat, where the game will walk you through how the game works, from the rules, from the tutorial, from the little adventure journal you'll be going through. And then when you're done with that combat, you'll go ahead and continue with the map phase, where you'll continue back and forth between combats and map phase, and we'll talk about how that all works soon. But first, I'm going to go ahead and talk briefly about how the combat works. This over here was set up, like I said already, for our second combat. Each combat, you're going to go through a setup of setup instructions. It's going to be partially from the journal and partially from the back of the card of whatever creature you are fighting against, in this case, the Golemo. You're going to set up the various encounter based on whatever tokens need to go on different spots on the board. And again, regular reminder, prototype and all that. You're going to build out the enemy deck, which the enemy is going to have certain things that they activate based on symbols in the deck, but the specific customization of the enemy deck is going to be based on the journal as you go through it. From there, you're going to go ahead and engage in combat. You're going to set up your own personal deck. This is a deck construction game, so you're going to start with a basic deck that has a bunch of basic cards specific to your creature, in this case the emberling cards over here, and then throughout the course of the game, you have cards you'll earn and be able to modify and put into the deck, replace and proxy out other things, but you're going to set up your cards over here and then start activating. When you activate a card, you're going to the effects on the card, but you're also going to get these over here. These gems over here are going to pay into other abilities, so you can use these for bonus actions based on whatever element card you have for your creature, but also many cards will give you various rewards or let you spend these tokens to be able to do more. So you're trying to manage the supply of these, and these will be a big factor in how well you're able to either keep up or keep ahead or just stay alive against the creatures you're fighting with. So if we activate this card over here, we're going to gain 3 of those, be able to move this card, do whatever it says, we can move, and we can go ahead and discard another card. So let's go ahead and retreat. Let's discard this card. It's actually a great card for slot 3, but that's neither here nor there. And then we'll slide things down over here, continuing that process. So as you can see over here, you're going to be activating your cards, trying to go ahead and choose the right timing, because the card that gives you the most gems is not always going to be the card that's right for whatever you're doing at any given time. And so there is a degree of choice between getting fewer of those gems, which will power things up, but choosing the right cards for you. This is a system you may have seen before in Arc Nova, the idea of having different actions and different strengths of the actions when you take them, but the cards aren't really cycling back to the beginning as much until you go through the deck, of course. That's going to be the core aspect of how you're going to be fighting through this. So for example, let's go ahead and actually do an actual ability over here. If we did Lava Lash, we'll go ahead and grab 2 gems over here, and then we can go ahead and deal damage. We'll deal 3 damage in range 3, and we discard 2 to resolve another card. So let's go ahead and deal 3 damage to this creature, taking 3 damage cubes, dropping them on the Golemo over here. The Golemo currently, actually, right now, the Golemo actually has, never mind, we're dealing only no damage. Right now, we're doing 1 damage, because right now the Golemo has armor on it. Because of these tokens over here, and because of its passive ability, it currently has 2 armor. It starts with 0 armor. We have to do at least 25 damage to kill it. I know it says 24, you have to exceed that over there. It does 2 damage to us, and it moves 1. So over here, we dealt 3 damage, and we're going to go ahead and discard 2 of these to resolve another card. So for example, right now, let's go ahead and resolve this card, this emberling card, which again will give us another 2 over there, which we can go ahead and earn there, and then we can move. So we're going to go ahead and move closer. Our movement is 2, so we're going to move 2 closer to it. We're going to attack, and we're going to go ahead and deal our 5 damage to it, and unfortunately, it still has armor, except this card says we ignore armor. So we're going to go ahead and deal a full 5 damage to it. That's bringing it to a total of 16 wounds on it so far, and then we're going to go ahead and use these 4 gems to power up an extra attack action over here. That one is going to do another 5 damage, but this time negated by the armor for a total of 3 more damage. The reason that's important over here is because right about now that we have 19 damage in it, we can go ahead and start tracking this. Over here is the card that will allow us to possibly capture it. If we deal 25 damage to the Golemo, it will die. It will lose, we'll go ahead and win the fight, and then everything's all said and done. What if you want to capture the Golemo? What if you want to use it for the future? What if you want that opportunity in front of you? Well, then you have to look at the training card over here. First, we have to tire it out. The Golem has to have at least 19 damage, which now it finally does. Then we have to lure it into the middle, lure it into the mud. The Golem has to end its turn into an exclamation mark space, so we need to get it into one of the exclamation mark spaces on the board, over here, here, or here. We have to go ahead and get that there, which will often involve a degree of retreating so that it attacks to us. That might put it in a position of high defense right about over here. If we move over here, and it moves here, it's going to have 4 defense, but right now we don't even care because we're not trying to kill it. And then once we do that, we can go ahead and show our power. We can use our special ability in a space with a quake. So while being in the space with the quake, which we just walked into, we can go ahead and use our special ability to deal 8 damage to it. In this case, we can choose, or 7 damage to it. In this case, we can choose not to have damage applied, so he stays alive. And then we've shown him up, and we have overtaken him, or any of those things. But now we've trained him. We've trained him, and now he gets added to our little journal. That's where you're going to have this little dragon prototype journal, which is going to display the various cards you're collecting along the way, the various creatures you're encountering, and you'll also be able to add that to your own private deck. And that's going to be the process of kind of capturing and or killing a dragon in combat. That's basically what happens in the game. And on its turn, we didn't really get to its turn because I had a specifically turn set up for that. But on its turn, it would go ahead and resolve one of these. So it would resolve this card over here, where it can go ahead and attack, rush 2, attack. So right about now, it's going to deal 2 damage to us, but then it's going to rush 2, which would move it closer to us, and then attack again. So we go ahead and get possibly 2 attacks of that, dealing 4 damage to us. And keep in mind, we currently only have 14 health on this particular creature over here. And so this is the kind of thing that you're playing with back and forth, trying to manage and mitigate around the known aspect of what their attacks are. There's also going to be things like this. You're going to set up the special attack cube over here, and then the special ability will trigger on its 3rd attack, where the opponent's going to gain 3 damage for each quake within range 2 of it. So for example, if I was over here, I would get 9 damage because of all the quakes currently on the board. You're going to have those kinds of terrain effects happening in each combat depending on who you're fighting against. You're going to have different things. From the most basic starting creature you fight off against is going to be very basic, just putting, nothing really that gets that much in the way on the board. A little bit of dancing around, depending, and again, it does depend on who you fight, because I haven't checked the other pathways, so I don't know how different the branching paths can be. But either way, past that, you're going to go all the way up to the final fights. And again, branching pathways, I don't know what things there may or may not be to explore otherwise. But the final fight I personally had is going to have a whole... I'll use the word shadows. I don't want to spoil things for you too much, but there were shadows in play in a way that was an interesting puzzle of how to take down the final creature. I'm not going to do more than that because I want to keep it nice and fresh for you in case you get around to exploring that yourself. But either way, that's going to be how a combat works. You're going to go through a sequence of managing your own cards, trying to stay ahead of the damage it's dealing. You will deal damage hard and fast, and at times, depending on what you're doing, the game, well, we'll get into it in final thoughts, but the game will seem too easy in some fights, but you'll also realize the damage you're taking in others, and some fights have their own complexity to them, which we'll talk about when we get to it. From there, when you're done with all of that, you're going to go to the journal. Let's go ahead and remove these from the board over here. You're going to go to the journal where you start reading through. Let's put these off to the side. You're going to start going through here where you read through whatever's going on in the journal. You're actually going to flip this card over here. There's going to be an arena effect over here, which possibly flips for certain effects, or it's going to give you certain things you have to go to for like the journal you're resolving. But you're going to go to the journal, whatever script it says, and start going through various choose your own adventure sequences in here where you go from pathway to pathway. That's going to pair up with a map that you're exploring as well. You're going to have this map over here. You're going to put a time tracker token over there, as well as a secret card, and not necessarily choosing the right one over here, but actually let's go ahead and choose the right one while it's right there. You're going to put a secret card into play and a time tracker, and now you have the ability to start exploring the map around you. As you explore different regions, you're going to place different tokens down on different things, signifying certain status effects that will affect how the game plays out. And so you're going to be placing these tokens down as you sit there and say, I'm going to explore 29, I'm going to explore 24, and have the journal interactions with those events. And slowly but surely, time will tick down and things will happen, which I won't get into to spoil any of this for you, but you're going to be interacting with a map phase over here, and then coming back to the game for the next combat eventually. It's a lot of exploration, a lot of talking to various characters, a lot of making choices that will affect the secrets and the items you walk into your next combat with. And there are going to be different maps over here in the prototype over here. I already have 4 maps over here on the prototype to explore, and I don't know how many the final game will come with, but over here, so you gotta have all these different maps, these different journal books. I have 2 journal books to go through in the prototype, and that's basically what's going on as far as the sequence of how you play through Dragon Eclipse. So to recap kind of what I went through over there, you're going to be interacting with, you're going to be having combats and engagements with various characters. You're going to have deck building that you'll be adding cards to your deck or proxying cards into your 10-card deck, removing and adding things, so you have a very tight system of which cards and how they're going to combo and play off each other. You're using a card activation row to try to decide the most effective way to engage in combat against your enemies and how to react to the specific things that they're going to be playing against you, being mindful of their special abilities when they come into play, being mindful of their effects, and being mindful of whether you're trying to capture it as well, tame the creature, and whether that's the right move at the right time or whether you possibly might be taking too much damage. Eventually, you're going to go back to the map over here. We have another sequence of adventures, encounters, adding things around, adding things to your deck, and you're going through this storyline. There is a storyline to the game. Again, prototype, so I only got to loosely explore certain facets of the story, but you're going to be going through that storyline and then alternating back and forth between those until something, I guess. This is where my limited aspect of what I can actually play through on the prototype means I don't know where this concludes. I assume you keep playing until it's not fun or until you end something. I don't know where it ends because prototype. But that's basically Dragon Eclipse. That's how the game operates over here as far as the game goes, which means now it's time to dive into the review part of things, or more first impressions than review. I really should say more first impressions. I'll try to title this video First Impressions instead of review, because I can't call it a review. I don't have a full picture of this game. I only have what I got to see in the prototype. In fact, I titled all the things. Normally I have what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. And for today, I called it liked, concerns, and what I can see others not liking. I don't actually have things I don't like about the game yet. I have things that I'm concerned about with the game, but that will come down to the final game to see where it ends up. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into this. First of all, again, prototype, and again, I work for GameFound, which has shared ownership with Awakened Realms. Please take that into account. But with that, as far as this game goes, first of all, I only got to explore it in the one-player mode. I did not get to see it all what the two-player mode is, nor did I get to see what the roguelike does. But as far as what I like in the game, to start off with is the production offhand. The adorable miniatures in general, this is standard for Awakened Realms over here. Their miniatures are top-notch quality. Some of mine are broken, so I'm not showing you all of them. Some of them are broken, but here's just the two currently on the battlefield. I have a bunch of these lined up behind me over here, various ones you'll engage with. I particularly like this guy. He's like both cute and creepy at the same time as far as his, multiple tentacle tails and his attempt to reach out after you. But either way, we have a bunch of cute miniatures. We got gorgeous art presentation. I will say some cards I'm hoping are in the prototype phase. Things like these cards over here, the fire element cards, which are in combat, the capturing, taming cards. I'm hoping some of these things are still in the prototype phase because it's not the end of the world if they're not. A lot of things over here are already beautiful as is. In fact, let me try to go ahead and realize that I didn't grab the foil cards over here. My prototype over here has a bunch of foil cards as a sample of what you can expect to see, which I figured I'll go ahead and show you. So if we move that over here, here's some of the foil cards over here that you'll have, that they're going to have these opportunities. They're going to have booster packs that you can kind of open, and it's not collectible. To be very clear, it's not collectible. At least my understanding is that it's not collectible, but they give you that sense of opening a booster pack, being able to add cards and mix around and different things, and then they have resealable booster packs to put cards back in to give you that sense of exploration, but not with an actual collectible aspect. So the presentation, the art, graphic design, for the most part, again, prototype, all that is top notch. But that's not important enough. Everything else is more about the mechanics. And to that end, the story and map modes in the game already, we're going to talk about this from the mechanical sense of combat, as well as the sense of exploration and adventure. So they give you a story over here. I can't say I'm overly invested with the story. Just to give you the most recent example, if I contrast this with Stalker, the most recent Awakened Realms game I covered, I was very much invested in the narrative and the story of Stalker, versus over here, I find it cutesy. It's nice. I'm interacting with the village. I'm exploring things. There are cute little moments, and, people appreciate you and talk to you, and there is a sense of adventure for sure, but I can't say I am as invested into the story, at least not yet. I like it. It's fine. It's nice, but Stalker, I remember being impacted by Stalker and feeling really drawn into it, and this one, less so. It's good. It's a good story. The world building, on the other hand, the sense of exploring around the maps, that's a fun system. There's things I specifically didn't want to talk about. I mean, things I'm specifically not talking about, but in terms of the map, the sense of exploration, you do have the opportunity to explore, and again, I don't know how the game's going to arc, but the first map, for example, you get to do almost everything on it, and that might just be because of the fact that they're trying to give you that sense of here's how everything works and works together, and maybe as you go through it, maybe you have less of a sense of exploration, but for the most part, I got to do a lot of the things I wanted to on the first map as I went through the game, and again, I don't know how that will fully evolve, and that's for better or for worse. I like getting a lot done. It does remove a little bit of the replayability, and it does remove a little bit of the pressure of time, because time is ticking down, and I like that system. I like the time slowly moving down as you have a secret card. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. Are messengers going to arrive at the city? Is an opportunity going to leave you? Is suddenly something going to happen that's going to force you into a combat? The opportunity to have a secret that comes up but depends on the time management, and the opportunity to have that secret not being known to the players has a lot of potential to it, and I wonder how much impact they're going to give that countdown clock and the secrets and the sense of pressure of timing around you as you play. So lots of potential promise with that little countdown timer, but I'm curious to see where it goes. So overall, I'd say that the story and exploration are good. They gave me a sense of things to do, a sense of choose your own adventure. There's a push your luck skill system, which we didn't really talk about, a testing system, where you're going to often engage with various tests. You're going to grab the item deck, and you'll have certain goals to go for. So maybe you're trying to get to the number, between 5 and 8 is a very common range in those tests over here. But let's say we're trying to get 7 is the perfect number, but 5 is at least good enough, and 8's a bust over here. So if we do this over here, we have 3. We can keep going. We're going to keep going. We got 1, that's 4. Let's go again over here. We got 1, but that eclipse symbol might have a bad thing. Very often the eclipse symbols are associated with bad things happening in those tests. So we're at 5. We're going to keep going over here. We're going to go ahead and 6 over here. There's a lot of 3s. I could bust to 9. You know what? I'm going to stop. We're going to stop at 6. We'll take the effect of whatever it is. We have the whatever the negative effect is from the eclipse over there. So you have a push your luck test system, which is fun to engage with. It's not necessarily amazing, not game breaking, but it's fun to engage with. But overall, the combination of tests, the combination of having an unknown countdown timer, the way you can interact with the village around you in the order of your choosing, sometimes locked by certain things. Sometimes you go somewhere and you have to come back later because you didn't go somewhere else first. So that does happen, but there is a sense of choose your own adventure as you go through it, from the quest book to the story to the maps, all of that. Overall, very good. My biggest critique would be the story itself doesn't pull me in as much as I would like yet. I'm intrigued. Maybe it'll go somewhere more interesting. I don't know yet. Past that, as far as the mechanics of the actual combat itself, I overall enjoy the combat with pros, cons, caveats, all of those things. But over here, I like this activation system. I like the fact that you have a card row where the things you want aren't necessarily the right order, but you have that choice. You get extra crystals to be able to power up other things. So that's always a trade-off. And I frequently found that I was pulled in different directions as I was choosing the cards. Your initial combats will start off, in my opinion, entirely too easy. The first few combats, and again, this is a tricky part about being able to grade a prototype where I've only had a certain number of combats. I've had a limited number of encounters, but the first few combats were certainly too easy. My final combat on the other hand was certainly much more of a challenge, and that's because there was more of a puzzly nature to the enemy I was fighting, combined with a much higher degree of damage being dealt back to me. And so there is a degree of mitigation, of trying to figure out how to operate within the cards you need, of occasionally figuring out when to dance back to avoid something versus when to stay within range because you'll need it on your end, and that might affect the creature you're playing as well. And so there is decision space. You won't necessarily feel that in the first few encounters, because the first few encounters to me felt like a walk in the park. I remember after my second encounter I was like, I like the system, but I really need this game to get more difficult. And it did. It did, to its credit. But again, I don't know what the normal arc of a final game will be like. Right now, it falls into a space where some combats have been, I like the system, but I'm not feeling challenged. And my last combat was, okay, that I felt a little more challenged there. But I'm curious what that ratio and arc will be as you're diving into the final game. But overall, I did enjoy the card activation system. You're also going to earn things throughout your journal phase. You'll start the encounter with crystals. You'll have items or secrets or things that can help you out as you go through it. And so that's all present, giving you enough of a tactical consideration. The enemies you're fighting against are varied enough. Again, difficulty-wise, I didn't always get the sense of difficulty enough, but the actual way the enemies operate and the way their cards are going to come out and set up the battlefield in different ways do give you a different challenge every single time without giving you a ton of rules overhead. Each new enemy has like a card of rules, a single card to go over like the setup and then the rules, and then you're good to go. But they do manage to feel differently in the ways that they operate. So I like the variability of the enemies. I like the fact that some of the enemies you can capture and tame and use yourself in the future. I like the deck construction aspect. I like the card activation aspect. So a lot of things I overall enjoy about the system, which is why it's a good time to move into my concerns with the system, which are the things that I either don't like or don't yet know how it will evolve, and that's why it's more of a concern than something that I don't like. The first one's going to be those miniatures I talked so nicely about. I'm curious how often miniatures are going to be utilized that you aren't capturing or taming. This guy's adorable. This guy over here, you got this miniature, you fight him, you do have the opportunity to buy a standee version of this game, so you're not forced into miniatures, so you can get the standees or the miniatures. And the standees, okay, great, you have a standee, you defeat this guy, maybe you never see him again, I don't know yet. On the other hand, if you capture him, then you definitely, the miniature having on the board, that miniature presence for that character that is now yours, that you're using again and again, that's great. That's repeated regular use of the miniatures. But what happens to the enemies that you can't capture? Or the enemies that you could capture but don't? Do you see them again, or are you only ever seeing a single miniature? I'm just holding up a random one, not specifically messaging you anything, but Are there certain miniatures that you'll only ever see once, and if you buy the miniature pack, are you just seeing that miniature one time across how many hours of playthrough? I just don't know yet. So that's going to be a first question or concern that I have over there. I also have the wonderment about the level of progression, the battle difficulty, the variability of the battle difficulty. Sure, this is a prototype. Across the handful of combats I've had, they have felt different, and some challenging, some not so much, and they have given me a sense of there's a lot you can do within a small map. There's a lot you can actually do here, more so than I thought after my first combat or two. And so I like that aspect, but I'm curious how that will evolve across an entire gameplay of this and not just a handful of sessions in a prototype. And so I'm very curious about the progression. I'm curious about how the maps will go, the books will go. How will the sense of choose your own adventure progress in terms of needing to maintain that same common thread so you keep coming back to things as you grow. I have a lot of curiosity about what the overall progression and variability and difficulty scaling will be as you go through an entire thing. It's not necessarily a critique so much as I've seen enough to feel potential and promise. I also could see it going the other way and not having as much potential or promise as I would like. I would say that one of my biggest concerns is about the management of all your stuff. This is a game where you're earning things as you go. You're earning new characters, you're earning new cards, you're putting cards into your decks. The sense of how to manage these things across a game, the sense of how to manage the different decks of the different characters you have, being able to come back to this game like, 2 months after your last session, does that game give you that? There is a lot of things going on, and it's Awakened Realms is a standard for them. This is not new in any way, shape, or form, but there's a lot going on in Awakened Realms titles in general, and Dragon Eclipse, while being on the lighter side in some senses, is still going to have that sense of mental load of just what you're managing game to game, and what happens if you take a break from the game for 3 months, and so I'm curious how that will play out. That's easily my biggest concern about the game, is I like the system, I enjoy this. It's both light and yet rewarding, and gives you powers and abilities, and gives you collection, and a seeking of more. There's a lot of things going on in this game that are enjoyable, but how will that hold up against the game that I'm trying to play? How often do I need to play this to keep it fresh in my mind, to keep it manageable as I'm going through all that? What happens if some cards get mixed up? How much of a punishing reset is there to try to figure out where you're left off? This is a regular concern for all campaign games. I think I have it a drop more with Dragon Eclipse, because I think on the one hand, Dragon Eclipse is targeting a slightly lighter demographic in what it's doing. On the other hand, I'm worried it will have the same management load as some of the other Awakened Realms titles. That's easily my biggest concern. It's not an actual problem, because I'm not far enough into this to have that be a problem yet. It's just the thing that I'm concerned about as I go through it. And then lastly, I'll say that at least in the prototype, not all creatures do you have the opportunity to capture or tame. The ones that I didn't feel like it was a challenge to choose capturing or taming. I want that to be a real decision space in the future. I want it to be that as you play through the game, there are creatures where you realistically have to make the determination of, I want to capture it, but if I try to, I might lose. And how do you keep that sense of adventure there? How do you make sure that the fail forward is there? That the sense of, because if you just try for the capturing and then just repeat the battle, just try that always. But I want that sense of gaining things to actually feel like an accomplishment and not just the default status quo that I will always engage with when presented with the opportunity. And again, choose an adventure, so I don't know what things I didn't get to see in this prototype, but so far the ones I encountered that had capture or kill, capture or taming or kill, taming was always a easy enough choice in that dynamic when presented with it. Those are the things I think that I'm overall concerned with about the game. That I want to see what the final game is like. This is a prototype. This has a limited number of encounters to actually go through. It's not a final game. As far as I can see others not liking, the biggest thing that comes to mind is the idea that there is a ratio of how much time you're spending on the encounter books, the journals, and the map phase versus the combat. Combat so far have been, at least the starting combats, are a little faster and punchier. Again, the later combats towards the end take a little bit more management, but they're still not that long. Combat so far are not as long as the exploratory phase, as the journal phase, as the map phase. It might be, I'd have to I don't know if I didn't track my time enough to know, but I'm guessing it's probably in the range of around a third combat to 2/3 combat and to 2/3 journal, map, and exploration. And that ratio might bother you. I'll say that I certainly prefer the combat. I'm much more here for the combat than anything else. The other stuff over here is secondary. Contrast with ISS Vanguard, I actually love the ship phase more than the exploratory phase. But in here, I like the combat and the management of your cards more so than the journal and exploration. But that ratio is not favored to the thing that I like more. The only reason I'm putting in something that I can see others not liking and not for an issue for me is the time sense of it. Even though I recognize that only a third of my time was spent on the thing that I wanted more of, the time passed. The time passed fairly quickly. I did the things and I didn't feel a sense of burden. I didn't feel a sense of, I just want to get to the next thing. And I have felt that in other games. There are many games where I do feel that sense of, I just want to be doing the fun thing, including in Awakened Realms titles for that matter. There are times where I felt, just get me back to the fun thing. And that's not something I felt over here, so it's not a complaint for me, but something to be mindful of for sure. As far as final thoughts on this game, I'm not going to be rating this game, and not because it's an Awakened Realms title, not because of that. I don't know if I can actually rate this game because it's of where it is currently. I'll say that 100% I enjoyed it. Not even a question to me, I enjoyed it. I had concerns about the lightness. To me, as I started the game, my first thought was like, hey, I like it, but like maybe this falls into Marvel United territory for me. Maybe it's a little too light for what I want. Maybe it's a fun opportunity to play this with my kids, to go through that sense, to have them make the choices. Because I do like the system, but at first it was lighter enough or not difficult enough that I felt that I could do that with them. And I think you still could, but I think there will be enemies you face that you do need to actually step in and hold the reins a bit more. So it evolved as I played it. It evolved. Pun not intended, but it evolved. The game evolved as I played through it in the sense of my opinion of where it lies difficulty-wise. So I like it. I've enjoyed it. I think the difficulty can be there. It depends on how often it's there, but it certainly can be there, and I hope it's there enough. Or to a certain extent, I hope they give you modes to a certain extent. Like, this is a charming enough game that maybe people want to play with their kids. Maybe there should be a rule set of, like, you know, the exploratory mode of the game where it's just fun and capturing things versus the actual difficulty where you actually have to strategize and get into it. So I've overall appreciated this, but I do have concerns about how it will evolve as you go through a full actual gameplay. So I like it. I enjoy it. I just need to see the final game before I can actually give it a numerical score, as opposed to just giving you my thought process of liking it, wanting to see more, excited for the final game, and very curious and or hesitant about certain aspects, particularly management, more so than anything else. I will say, I did not get the roguelite mode in my prototype. Some reviewers got it, some did not. I did not have the roguelite mode in my prototype, so I can't comment on that. But to me, even if the management aspect of things proves to be too much, that mode is one that I am very excited about. I did like the game, and if they can have the difficulty there so that the roguelite mode is rewarding enough, then I'm definitely there for that, because I like roguelites in general, and I like the system of what Dragon Eclipse is doing enough to see it working well with a roguelite. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, I mentioned already, but Marvel United. If you're looking for a charming game that I always recommend, that has cutesy miniatures and accessible gameplay that I'll both play with my friends for a lighter experience and play with my kids for a fun time, Marvel United from Command Games is always one that I heavily enjoy. And if you're looking for another Pokemon-adjacent style game where you're capturing and collecting and going on a sense of adventure, Robomon was a game that was from Gay Barrett Publishing. Robomon's a game that I haven't played, but I see a lot of comparisons between this and Dragon Eclipse. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.